So this is the lower Manhattan area where you have the Staten Island ferry and the ferry to Governor's Island. So this is a good chance just to have an overview of this. This is the new Staten Island ferry, and this replaced the old Staten Island ferry, which is now being used for the ferry to Governor's Island. And that's a ferry that's pretty much run only during the summertime and a few times in the wintertime. And it's really not used much at all. And you can see in the distance, that's the old Staten Island ferry terminal right there. The new one here, really bright and airy on the inside. A lot of security also. And here is a train station too for the 1 and the R train. So that makes it very easy to get to the Staten Island ferry for people who are in Manhattan who want to go to Staten Island. I think that makes a big difference. We'll take a look around here at the Staten Island ferry in the lower Manhattan area before we take a look at Pattery Park. Now, Pattery Park is a park that is a really nice park to go to because there's so much space. A lot of movies were filmed there also. And it has a direct view onto the area where the Statue of Liberty is. And that makes for very nice space and very, very scenic for this Pattery Park. Now, we're just taking a look at the old Staten Island ferry and the terminal, and you can see they're building a new space here, and that's one of the things about New York. They're always building. So you can see here, beautiful terminal, and again, as I said, during the summertime, there are regular ferries that go from here to Governor's Island, which is a short trip. It's like about a 10-minute trip by ferry. And if you were to be able to walk from here to Governor's Island, it would be about a 10-minute walk also. So it's a very, very short walk, a very, very short trip. But because Governor's Island is primarily used as a park and not used by a lot of people, it's really not that open to everyone using it like Staten Island would be. Now we're going to go from here to Pattery Park, and you can see how beautiful the walkway is around here on the lower part of Manhattan. But this is the way people had lived for 150 years. So Canal Street was one of the streets where they had a wall, and also Wall Street was one of the streets where they had a wall too, where they limited where people would go because that was the limits of the city. And for a while it was just like that, where people ended up really wanting to just to be in a limited area of the city. It wasn't really necessary to be too much around. So we're gonna go to this part of the city, of Pattery Park. You can see here how there are all these buildings here. These are the buildings bordering the park. But this is another way into the park here, just to take a look at what the park looks like from the other side. And you can see in the distance, that's the Staten Island ferry leaving, and going elsewhere. But people really enjoy just taking a stroll in Pattery Park because it's so convenient to just look at the water. And also, don't forget, a lot of Manhattan has grown too, where they added land to the different parts of Manhattan. It wasn't just the creation of the World Trade Center. What they did with a lot of the earth on the World Trade Center is they dumped it to the side of Manhattan to extend it. But that was even going on before they created the World Trade Center. What happened is the World Trade Center, prior to the World Trade Center, a lot of times when they had trash and other things to dump, they would dump it onto the side of Manhattan. So you could see that Manhattan had grown over the time. And even though you might think that it did not grow, when they were excavating for the World Trade Center, what they found is there were like old items near where the World Trade Center was, which was maybe 150 feet away from the shoreline. So what that meant is that they were dumping many things into the side, and but that was what was normal. What else would they do? They didn't have the same sort of techniques that we have now and zoning that we have now back then. So for them, at the time, to get rid of refuse, you just dumped it to the side of the island. And over time, what happens is it grows. So right now, what we have is an area of Manhattan called Battery Park City. And that was reclaimed land from the Hudson River. And that belongs to the state because there's a law called riparian rights, which means that land created that wasn't there before in like the waterways belongs to the states. So all that land, all the earth that was taken from the excavation of the World Trade Center, or where the World Trade Center was dumped to the side. That created Battery Park City. And the land itself is owned by the state, and it's leased to the people who have the buildings in Battery Park City. So a lot of times the co-op owners or condo owners of Battery Park, they really don't own the land. They're leasing the land for a long term from the state, but that's okay for them. I mean, otherwise they wouldn't have the great views of the city, and they wouldn't be able to enjoy like the waterways. So what we're doing is we're taking a little view of the city, of the Battery Park area right now, just to see what it's like. And it's sunset, or close to sunset at this time. So we're just taking another look around just to see what it looks like. And you can see here how the building looks really nice. That's State Street. There's a lot of financial concerns in that building. And there we go here. And where we just came from, this is Water Street. You look down that street, Water Street, and that big tall building is 55 Water Street. That's really the largest building in terms of volume in New York City. And attached right to it is another very large section. And right next to it, closest to us, is a heliport. And when the president comes into town, he always lands in that heliport. The streets are closed off, and then his motorcade goes from this area all the way up Franklin Delano Roosevelt Highway to Midtown. And you can see how nice this whole area is. Very convenient. So we'll take another look at the water from here. And there's a lot of tour boats that are coming around here. And this is also the area where they take the boats from here to go to the Statue of Liberty. And you can see in the distance there's the Statue of Liberty. And today it's a clear day. When it's not clear, you can't even see the Statue of Liberty from here, which seems kind of odd, but that's the case. And this is like an ideal place. And what happens in this whole area of Lower Manhattan, it really controlled the waterways. And you can see a number of forts around here that really allowed the control of this whole waterway to prevent ships that were hostile from coming in. And one of the interesting parts of this Manhattan area, you might remember how originally the Dutch used to control Manhattan, and that was great. However, when the Dutch ended up losing control of Manhattan, one of the stories is that the British actually had lost control of one of the islands in Indonesia, and the Dutch had taken over that island. And so what happened is the British then, in retaliation, ended up taking over the island of Manhattan. And then a treaty was developed where the British basically said, look, you took our island in Indonesia, modern day Indonesia, we're taking this island of Manhattan from you. And then the international powers at the time said, okay, well, that's fair. So then the treaty got developed. And that's really why there was no major war over the takeover of Manhattan. Because the Dutch had taken over a British space in New Holland, or in the area of the Indonesian space, and then the British took over the Dutch space. And the folks here were smart. The folks in Manhattan were smart. The British came, they said, we're taking over. And the Dutch merchants said, okay, well, if we allow you to take over without putting up a fight, what's in it for us? And the British said, you can keep everything, and just accept our rule. And that was okay. They did that. And so here we're taking a look at Battery Park City. You can see a lot of people like to fish. You know, it's very nice to see the boats too in the distance. And you can see here. And then let's take a look. The distance, the Statue of Liberty. And you can see there in the distance the Statue of Liberty. And how nice it is just to be viewing everything from here. And when people leave from here to take a trip to the Statue of Liberty, pretty much it's an all-day trip, because by the time you get down here, and by the time you're ready to go to the Statue of Liberty, by the time you're there, it's already 2 hours, 3 hours. And then you're gonna spend another hour or 2 hours in the Statue of Liberty area, and you come back, and it's another hour to come back. So your day is pretty much used up. But this is the area, from this area, people will take the boats to go to the Statue of Liberty. And now we're looking at the water side, the westernmost side of the park, where people are for the Liberty, for the Battery Park State Park. So you can see here how it's really nice, very picturesque, seeing everything. And the cruise ships, whether it's a sailing cruise ship that has engines powering it, because obviously they're not going to want to have their passengers stuck. You can see here with the beautiful trees, people just coming down here just to enjoy the environment. You can see the park. Now you can see we'll be coming across a fort, but I'll just point out one of the other forts that were around here. So that one of the other forts that control the waterways. And so this way you can kind of get an idea of how these waterways can easily be controlled. Like if you look in the distance, the brick building, that was one of the buildings that was a fort that controlled the waterway, right there. And we're gonna come to another fort in Battery Park that also controlled the waterway too. And so what's important to remember is it was very critical for people to be able to control these waterways. And thus it allowed the control of the merchants and the safety of the ports. Now here we'll just walk by one of these boats, the tour boats. You know, even though it says sail today, as I said earlier, they're really not sailing. It's powered by engines, because the last thing they need is for the boats to be stuck, and all their passengers to be upset that the boats were stuck. You can see a beautiful boat, chance for people just to enjoy beautiful weather on a day like today. And that could be like really enjoyable for a lot of people. And we're gonna go up to where they had the other fort, so that people can take a look at what the forts looked like. And you can see in the distance from here the World Trade Center. And kind of get an idea of how far we are away from the World Trade Center. And that's where the fire station is for this whole area, because there are fires on boats, fires elsewhere. You know, it makes sense to be a little safe. And a monument to the United States Navy right here. You can just make out like everything going on here. And we're coming up to the fort. Take a quick look at the fort. You can see here. Now, in the distance is Jersey City. That's about 20 years ago, none of those buildings were there. And then a mayor, Brett Schindler, was very eager to have like Jersey City develop. And he had all these buildings built. Well, he encouraged the buildings to be built, up to the point where the citizens of the area said, well, what is in it for us? And so they started not being so happy about having all the big buildings built. But then they started that again. And the big building that you see towering above all the other buildings is the Goldman Sachs Tower. And there's other buildings going up now in Jersey City, because it is a very popular area to build. They are very business friendly. However, they're trying to be business friendly with discretion, because it's important to balance the business interests of a city with the interests of the citizens of the city. And that's kind of like what's being weighed. Even now in New York, that's the same issue being weighed. How much to value business, how much to value the citizens of the city, because both are equally important. Sometimes people forget the value of business, sometimes they forget the value of the individual citizens. So here we're coming to the fort that was critical to the defense of Manhattan in the lower Manhattan area, preventing people who are not so friendly from kind of getting into the city or being too influential in the city. And then you see this, like the cruise boat here, that's around, taking another look of the city.
Handrails, whenever possible, particularly on stairways. Please step up, watch your step, and hold the handrails while moving on.
So now we're taking another look into the park, and you can see here just how close we are to all the buildings right here. And that's Broadway. We're looking toward Broadway, and that building right there is the old Standard Oil building. You can see now we're in the center of the park. A lot of people really enjoy these parks. And again, what ends up happening is, because there's so few open spaces in the city, the value of the open spaces, such as with this park, become much more valuable, because what you don't have becomes much more valued than if you have a lot of it. So relative to a lot of other cities, the open parks that are in New York are very, very valued, because there are so few of them, and because there are so many people. So we're gonna go towards the Standard Oil building at 25 Broadway, and just to see some other parts of the park and walking through it. This is just to give everyone a good idea of what Pattery Park is like and lower Manhattan is like. So this way, if you ever visit the city, you have an idea of what there is to visit and what you might want to see. You can see here, like the other buildings, and in the distance that's 4 World Trade Center, and the tall building is 1 World Trade Center, and a lot of construction going on. And again, here we'll take a look to the back where we walked from. You can see the water there, the ferry that's there, and you can almost make out where the Statue of Liberty is, right there, you know, and it's very convenient seeing everything. And we're very close to where everyone is. And in the distance, that's called Pattery Park City. And this is Pattery Park, that's Pattery Park City. And as I mentioned earlier, all of those buildings are on land that was not there before. And it's a very nice community. And that land is owned by the state. And so the people, as I said, that live there pay rent to the state for that land. So now we're exiting out on the Broadway area, and so I think that's like it's very nice to see all this area, to take a look at Pattery Park. And as I said, what makes this so valuable is that that it's like there's not much of not many of these open parks in the city, but that's really nice. So people just can enjoy it much, much more. We'll just take a look around, and you can see here how musicians in the park, a lot of people just leaving the park. And there, again, this is another view of the park, of the fort that was used a couple hundred years ago to defend Manhattan against people who might try to bring ships that were hostile to the United States and to the colonies into the New York harbor.